We've done 3 fantastic cold opens, right?
And none of them are getting in. We're not having a cold open this week.
Cue the music.
Hello and welcome back to the Comic Lyra podcast, the podcast where I, Ryan, also soon to be known as Comic Stan, I've got a guy with me. He's not a real comic book reader, but he is now because I make him read comic books for the podcast, and then we talk about them. He's more of a literature guy, and he is my aforementioned co-host, my mental co-host. It's Jamie.
They're getting better.
I'm throwing up a little bit because it sounds a bit rigid most of the time, you know? Sounds a bit like too rehearsed. And I realized the rest of the podcast is the opposite of that. So maybe it's worth the intro kind of more falling in line. Get people ready for what they're about to hear if they haven't experienced this before, which is somewhat chaos and madness for the most part, isn't it? Me trying to rein it in, obviously.
The jazz that I've been talking about us doing for nearly 2 years now, you're finally on board with it being jazz, baby.
Not quite to the level of jazz. Depends on the jazz. Is there like more structured jazz, like on the spectrum of jazz?
Yeah, of course there is. The jazz spectrum.
Think of it like being... like, obviously we're on the spectrum, but think of it more like...
No, Ryan, never. Us?
Think of it
never.
More like we're in the structured area, but we'll sometimes dip into more of the chaos and then we'll come back. Like a long jazz piece where it goes from structure to chaos, you know?
Cue the music.
Yes. Sure. And then... where the music ends up, don't know yet. That'll happen in the future. So that'll happen 7 days from now on. Or whenever we record this in relation to when it comes out.
Oh, we don't even know anymore, do we?
No, it's time's relative and made up. So, you know what they say? This is a comic book podcast, by the way, for anyone who's kind of lost sight of that in the past few minutes.
Week 3 of Merc with a Mouth Month,
Week
baby.
3 of Merc with a Mouth Month, which we are getting better at saying because we're saying it more often.
We're saying it once a week for a month.
Once a week. I think there's a couple of other months that we should introduce as well. Get ready for this, right? I think for the big 2, just for a themed thing, we could do Marvel March, right?
And DC December.
DC Diciembre, because that's like the Spanish way of saying it, and it sounds more like DC at the beginning. So rather than DC December, it's DC Diciembre.
Or it's just Diciembre.
Yeah. Diciembre.
I'm sorry to our Spanish listeners.
I'm doing Spanish on Duolingo, so that probably explains why it's not that good. Yeah, exactly. Like I'm at that level. Yeah. Well, I'm not taking it seriously, but I know some words.
Absolutely.
So yeah, maybe we'll do those in the future. But this is Merc with a Mouth month, as we've established, and we are on week 3, which means we're going through the decades of Deadpool. And this one is actually one that's close to my heart because I've told you beforehand. We're doing Deadpool from 2012.
I thought it was 2013.
So we are doing a story arc that takes place in 2013, but it started in 2012. So normally you'll call a series from when it starts, which is so weird with like Batman now. Batman's been running since like 2016 or something, so it still says Batman 2016 now.
It's 2024.
So, exactly, but it's just been running for that long. Like a slew of different writers.
2016 was a shit vintage.
2016, well, for what? For comic books?
Just for everything.
That's when all the celebrities died.
It's when all the celebrities died. It's when Trump got in the first time. It's when Brexit happened.
It's when Batman v Superman came out.
It's when Batman v Superman came out.
And that was a letdown.
Yeah.
It was arguably the worst thing of 2016.
It was just a bit of a shit year, wasn't it?
Yeah, but also it's when Deadpool, the film, came out. So
it was.
Swings and roundabouts. Every cloud, as they say.
Every cloud has a Deadpool.
So this series, again, close to my heart because this is probably my favorite Deadpool series. So I was eager to get to this one. And it just coincided with being a point in time where we've done 97, we've done 2004, and now we're doing 2012/13. So it feels like we're kind of taking a step back look at his run up until now, because then next week we're going to do a more modern one and just see where he is now. But yeah, this one of my favorites, and we're going to dive into exactly why that is. Just a little off top, where are you on it? This week's one? Good, bad, mid?
Good. Very.
I thought if you left it at that was like a really ominous like clue for like good, like, but let's unpack that in a minute.
Good, but very much America.
Well, yeah, it's all. I mean, he's Deadpool. I was going to say he's American. He's Canadian, so
it's much America.
It is much America, but he's kind of American staple, despite being Canadian, in a similar way that Wolverine is.
Yeah, it was an interesting read. I think it really sort of tunes in to what we were concerned about as a culture in 2012, 2013.
Yeah. It was on the pulse of it was at the zeitgeist, I think is a way of saying it.
A little bit. So should we starting with the arting?
I've got some credits. Should we get the
We
credits
do
out
those first, don't we?
Just to credit the people who have made the things that we
I thought
enjoy.
this was Jazz, baby.
Jazz has credits. If you buy a Jazz album, it tells you who played it on the back.
No, there was an edict in the 13th century that said from this time forward into time immemorial, all Jazz albums shall just be credited as Jazz, baby.
This is one of the few areas that I can call you out on this, because I'm pretty sure Jazz was created in America, or credited with being created in America. And I don't think I'm not a history buff, but I don't think America existed in the 13th century.
Well,
I mean, the Americas, like
it
as a
existed
continent,
in our hearts.
If you go back in time in the 13th century, you just still sing the American national anthem with a tear rolling down your cheek, like it's still real to me. Damn
There's
it.
just a bunch of Western European peasants being like,
one day, this place is going to be great for a while, and it's going to get really messy afterwards. Get really good, get really bad afterwards. Kind of like England. Was England ever good?
Depends on whether or not you were English, mate.
So never if you were English, because there's always something to complain about.
No, it was great if you were English. If you lived anywhere else in the world, we were a bit of a nuisance.
Yeah, we were either your conqueror or your neighbour.
Yeah, literally. And we weren't pleasant in either situation.
No, probably at least a little better to be a neighbour.
I say we weren't alive.
No, but people always say that, don't they? It's like the football, which is topical right now for us. People say, "Oh, we kicked your ass." It's like, did you join the team?
Yeah,
that's an old Mitchell and Webb business.
Did Southgate pick you? Did you get a cap?
And apparently, it's not coming out now, and I couldn't give a shit. But,
sorry, what's not coming out?
Not coming home. Sorry.
No, football did not come home.
No. Was it even made here? I don't know. That's a different podcast. Not even a different episode of our podcast. Different podcast entirely.
Yeah.
Because I don't know anything about football, and I don't want to learn.
Well, it has quite interesting origins. So it was a game that was played with an inflated sheep's bladder.
By the Aztecs?
No, by English people in England. But it was played with sides of anything between 50 and 100. It would basically be a whole village having a mass kickabout.
I wouldn't mind seeing 100-person football match if there were no rules.
There weren't.
That'd be interesting. That actually might get me to watch, to be fair.
There's some traditions that just die out, aren't there?
Love to see Wayne Rooney just knocking people out like the guy from the Goonies.
I'm sure if you went to a nightclub in Alderley Edge on a Friday night, you could probably see that.
That's a very local reference.
It's where all the Man U players lived.
Yeah. So this is the point where I'll time code the credits because we really went on a tangent after that. So we're doing issues 15 to 20 or 21. I can never remember. It's 5 or 6 issues, but we're doing that arc.
I read 15 to 19.
No, that's fair.
You said 5 issues, and I read the 5 issues.
That's 4 issues.
No.
Oh, okay. No. Yep. You're right. I will concede. I got that wrong.
You jumped on that so quick, so I didn't explain it.
19 take away 15. I was like, that's 4, but it's like this different kind of structure we're talking about here, isn't it? So the credits are, as I did have them up in front of me, was writers Gerry Duggan and Brian Posehn. Now that is interesting, not only just because it's just co-writers, but this is because it's interesting because Gerry Duggan is a very staple like comic book writer. Like he's done a lot of stuff. He's a well-known comic book writer. Brian Posehn is a comedian and not like known for writing comic books, at least not at this point. So I felt this was a very interesting choice and a great choice because I love the comic, but to actually get a comedian writing Deadpool because he's meant to be a funny character. So I thought that was noteworthy. Penciler Declan Shalvey, and he also did the cover art as well. So
cool.
So again, very kind of odd, like dual writers kind of thing. I don't think we've read any before with dual writers, but did the comedy kind of come through at all? Like, or did you get like a better sense of the comedy compared to previous ones without comedians writing it?
It wanted to reference pop culture in a way that probably would have been funny to me like 11 years ago.
When it came out.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I chose that number. You were doing well on the math.
I thought 11 was like your lucky number.
No? I'm not going to tell the audience my lucky number unless they sully it.
Is it 1?
No.
All right.
1's the loneliest number.
Is it 2?
No, that's the loneliest number since the number 1.
All right. Is it 74?
That's just a random number.
But I was trying to do the rule of 3 for comedy because you thought I was going to say 3 and then you thought I was going to zig and then I zagged.
You zagged.
Yes.
It was funny.
I'm known for zagging.
Humor.
Comedy. Jokes. We know jokes.
Yeah, I reckon if you were like fairly entrenched in the culture, it would have been quite funny. For me, a lot of the humor fell a little bit flat.
There were lines that made me laugh, not all of them, but I got more of a sense that this was not Deadpool. Deadpool wasn't trying to make people laugh. Like, this was his stream of consciousness again, like we said with the last one, but with more pop culture references. That was my kind of sense.
We have reached Deadpool's final form here, I feel.
Well, that's the problem, because unfortunately I've read more modern Deadpool, and this is, in my opinion, this is the best he gets.
So is this sort of peak Deadpool then?
For me, absolutely, yeah. They haven't reached it again, in my opinion. So we can start with the arting, or I've got a little passage here that I copied from Wikipedia, which is, it's from Deadpool's Wikipedia, and the subtitle of this section is just titled Sexual Orientation.
Cool, let's do it. Is Deadpool queer?
So, in December 2013, Deadpool was confirmed as being pansexual by Deadpool writer Gerry Duggan from this series via Twitter. However, this post on Twitter has since been deleted by Gerry Duggan. And then when asked about Deadpool's sexuality, co-creator Fabian Nicieza stated, Deadpool is whatever sexual inclination his brain tells him he is in that moment. And then the moment passes. So, apparently, he's all sexuality.
That's such a non-committal answer.
It is, yeah. And I think this is a problem when you ask, like, a potentially Gen X, like, older Gen X writer who's, like, not experienced with that kind of stuff, who's just, again, just trying to kind of palm off an answer of, like, please stop asking me about it. Like, we haven't thought that far. Or he doesn't care enough. And maybe you can take that as, like, having an issue with the writer on that regard or not. Like,
I don't think Deadpool's sexuality is that important or interesting.
I know he's a bit of an underdog player in the Marvel universe, in the sense that you'd be surprised at the amount of characters he's got with.
Yeah, he slings some rope, doesn't he?
Yeah. He gets married in this series as well.
Does he?
Yeah. Do you want to know who? It's not an existing character. She's like a queen of demons kind of character. And the joke being is that, like, she's like, you know, like a hot demon, like a was a succubus kind of look kind of thing, but she's queen of the demons, and to her, because she literally lives with like monsters and demon stuff, she's like, he looks all right, doesn't he? Like,
Wade Wilson's actually quite handsome.
Exactly, by contrast, and then he becomes like king consort of the demons, which is a fun kind of thing. There's a big spread on like the issue where it's like him and all the Marvel characters attending his wedding.
Yeah,
so that's a great like cover art. I don't know how many actually went to the wedding, because, you know, people don't like Deadpool.
Well, like Tony Stark's funeral at the end of that Avengers film.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that was all the MCU characters at the time, and that one kid that he met like once, and everyone's like, "It's that kid from Iron Man 3."
The one who looked after his suit.
Yeah,
he was rad.
Yeah, he was
Gave
cool
him
character.
the watch. The best line in that film is, "You broke my friend's watch."
Yes, and it was was it Dora the Explorer watch?
Yeah, it was the Dora the Explorer digital watch. Yeah.
Great watch. But yeah, so Deadpool's pansexual at times, or he's not, or he's all sexualities, or he's asexual. So there's your answer.
Great, cheers, guys.
We've got to the bottom of it.
Deeply interesting content.
Exactly.
Great tweet.
Although he does remark on other men's looks as well, so maybe that contributes to it. I think we're done talking about it. I think we've exhausted this for all it's worth. We've mined this subject for as much gold as we're getting, which
Absolutely.
was none to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, like, right up top, I was like, I'm not interested in this line of questioning.
I don't like where this is going, but I'll go along with it anyway. Just because you thought I might have some gold, but I didn't.
Yeah, this is it. Like,
I was hoping you would bring the gold.
We were just hitting that rock, baby.
Should we leave it in? Yeah, we'll leave it in.
Should we leave it in? We've been recording for like 40 minutes at this point, and I'm not sure we've gotten anything we can use yet.
No gold as of yet, but give us time. We're slow to start. So yeah, starting with the arting, which obviously comes with...
I don't want to do it.
I'll do it. You don't have to join in. I'll stay true to the core of the podcast.
You're gaslighting me.
I mean, I haven't said anything untrue, have I?
That's how that works.
The gaslighting gets thrown around a lot these days, doesn't it? Like whenever, like in the media or something, when everyone lies about something, go, "Oh, they're gaslighting us." It's like, I'm pretty sure the point of gaslighting is not lying to just get away with a lie. It's lying to make the person you're lying to question their own sanity.
You can just lie.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Lie
but it gets brandied around so much now. People are like, and then they told us this bullshit, so they're trying to gaslight us. It's like, are you sure they're not just trying to get away with a lie? Because that's what that is. Like, they're just trying to achieve a lie.
Go on then, Ryan, cue the music.
All right, so we're starting with the arting, and we're gonna talk about art. See, it's fun every time.
You're really attached to it. I don't know why.
I think it just adds a bit of levity. some sorely needed
to
levity.
this notoriously serious
to this
broadcast.
somber podcast where we're talking about Deadpool for a month. You could do with a bit of levity.
Do you know what though? We're what we're 3/4 of the way through now. Deadpool month, and I'm not bored of it.
No, that's why it's so good to just go across the kind of across the decades.
If anything, I think it's probably our most interesting in our oeuvre, our body of work. I think it's the most interesting thing yet because we've really had a good chance to like look at we've achieved what I think we wanted to achieve with Batman and Superman v Batman and Superman.
Yeah,
Remember
we're doing a extended version of that because we actually didn't have enough time to really get into that stuff properly, did we? We were just like, here's what they looked when they started, and here's them now, and like there's something to that, but not enough. I feel like
whereas this has been a really interesting process. So the art.
Also, I think we should do that for Superman next year when that comes out.
I think we absolutely should.
Super month.
Yeah. In September.
Well, when the film comes out.
Oh,
we don't know when that is. But we'll still call it Super month.
Because if we didn't have we could have Marvel March and then Merc with the month May.
Even more. Well, I think we'll run out of Deadpool fairly quickly.
No, there's
we
loads
can do
of
this series. I'll do this series all day. I've read extra of this series outside of what we're talking about in this episode because I loved it.
Well, you'd already read it, hadn't you?
Years ago. Like I'm rereading it and I'm like, it's as good as I remember.
Oh,
like,
that's
the best
nice.
part. Yeah.
Oh, I'm really glad.
It's rare that happens.
Yeah, right?
Exactly.
So the art, I didn't notice it.
I think I noticed it more as I went along than I did initially. So when I first looked at it, like again, the arc we're doing, page issues 15 to 19 of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. When I first kind of looked at it, because I started here first for the podcast, I immediately thought, oh, Marvel house style with some brighter colors. Like that's kind of about it. But as I went on, there were more individual panels that I really liked. And then I started noticing more things that I thought were good about it. Like, prime example, the proportions of the characters. In terms of style, it's a bit cartoony, a bit like non-realistic, but the actual proportions of the characters, they're a bit more slender than you normally see in like superhero comics. And I think that works for all the characters here.
I definitely don't think this is just straight up and down like Marvel sort of in-betweeny 2010s house style. Because the Marvel house style was pretty firm from like the mid-noughties, wasn't it?
Yeah, but I do think it does change every decade just to always trying to be more modern, if that makes sense. So like there's a house style that kind of endures, but I think it is always the house style itself is changing with like whatever the most like popular comics at the time are, or like from the previous decade, and they kind of build off that.
Yeah, totally.
In the same way that Romita Senior and was made the house style for a while, and then Todd McFarlane kind of made it after him because it was like, oh, this one's doing really well. Let's just make them all look like this.
I mean, this guy's doing the most popular art that we are selling right now, so let's just make everything look a bit more like that.
Exactly. But I do think the Deadpool series, the history of it has been a bit more unique to Deadpool than the normal house style.
So I don't have a whole heap to say about it. I think it was fun seeing the sort of Deadpoolized versions of the X-Men.
Yeah.
You know, you kind of pick them out and you're like, oh, that one looks like Cyclops and that looks like Beast and there's Asian Wolverine.
Yeah. Also, we're going full spoilers. This came out over 10 years ago for anyone who cares.
Somebody does.
Yes.
We got a comment. Well, I'll do the comment later, but we got a comment.
I told you X amount of time before someone comments about spoilers.
I think we may have even talked about it in that episode.
Yeah, I think that they were referencing that, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I mean, that's funny. Well done, you.
Thank you for getting our humor. We appreciate it. A note I did make is I liked just generally the vibrant colors. I liked how Deadpool's red was very vibrant red, which doesn't sound like much, but in the past two Deadpool comics we read from a decade ago and a decade from 20 years ago, that he looks like he stands out more to the rest. So the last one we did, it was kind of a lot muted color. Cable and Deadpool was kind of very muted colors. So red Deadpool he didn't stand out as much. I liked looking at this Deadpool in the rest of the panel because he was like a really, again, vibrant red color, and that stood out to me.
I mean, this is the thing. I don't really have many notes about the art, but that's not to say I didn't enjoy it. And I enjoyed flicking through this, you know.
I think one notable bit of art that we have looked at and examined every week for Merc with a Mouth Month is how have they made Deadpool look fucked up. His skin.
Yeah.
And I love this version. I think this is like prime
He
fucked
looks
up look.
so perfectly zombified, doesn't he?
It looks like the skin is stretched and full of holes over his exposed muscle tissue.
Yeah.
Which is a great look for someone who like is sensitive about how they look. Now, he's a lot less sensitive here. Like, this is kind of the character arc we've seen over the decades.
Yeah.
He was so sensitive in 97 that he kidnapped a blind woman to be his roommate because he didn't want to live with someone who could see him. And he could have the mask off.
He was sensitive enough in the early noughties that he turned himself blue.
Yes.
And then here, he's in Japan in a baseball cap and normal clothes, just kind of cutting about doing his thing.
Yes. And he still likes to have his mask on all the time, but he'll roll it up to like eat food or whatever. So yeah, he's definitely more the deepness, and we'll get into it in the story, but the richness of the character and the insecurity comes more from himself as a person rather than how he looks. Which again, I think it's a notable thing of like how this character has changed over decades. Because now, like, modern Deadpool doesn't give a shit about any of that. He's just literally, he's only making jokes as far as I've seen. He's like not doing much deep stuff. But yeah, I like there's some good rain effects and some great fight scenes. Like I think the fight scenes are drawn really well. They're simplified. Like there's a rule with anything I think these days for making stuff, which is just keep it simple. And then, like, if you feel the need to make something more complex, like, you'll know when to. Yeah. This kept it simple and effective. There was, like, big punches that you knew who was punching who, or big kicks or whatever. And there was never an instance where I was like, wait, what's going on here? Like, everything was clear, and it still felt exciting. Like, when you skim through the panels of a fight scene, you felt like a fight was going on, but it never felt like, wait, what's happening now? Like, it was all very clear, and I think that's a unique skill in itself for a comic book artist, you know, like some artists are better at certain things than others, and I think this one was very good at the fight scenes.
Yeah, totally. I think it looked good. I mean, there's not much to say about it, really, is there? Which is a shame.
I mean, you keep saying that, and then I have more to say.
And then you have more to say, yeah.
Stylistic choice. None of the characters have pupils in their eyes, or some do, but Deadpool doesn't, and some others don't.
Well, this is it. Deadpool and all the Deadpool eyes characters don't have eyes, and I was going to mention that actually. Now you've reminded me.
I think that makes him look more comedic, because when he's like smiling with the lack of pupils, it looks a bit more stupid.
Weird stylistic choice.
I think it works for this because this is a bit more of a zany story. So like not including certain details makes it feel a little more removed from reality.
I don't know if this is zany as compared to the one we did last week.
I mean, Deadpool himself is zany, so
but this is very grounded for a Deadpool story.
Yes, but in the way that some of the previous ones we've done have been somewhat grounded.
97 was very grounded.
Cable and Deadpool was like, we're turning the whole world blue.
Cable and Deadpool was fucking mad. It was but I did appreciate
how they made that more grounded than it could have been.
Well, I mean, I don't know who they did, mate, but yeah.
Well, that's a conversation for last week, and we won't revisit it because we never will.
We never will.
Because we never will. One other thing I was going to made a note of was that there's a scene later, which we'll get into in the story, I think, in more depth, but there's a scene later where Deadpool has a close-up panel of his face in despair. And I thought, even with his fucked up face, that looked really good, I thought. Like a bigger panel, and you got the actual sense of emotion from a character who's normally quipping and funny and stuff. Yeah. And I think that was good in this, especially for a character who's, again, got a fucked up face. So when you're doing those kind of more complex facial expressions on anyone who's not just a standard human, I think that's a challenge, and I think they did really well here.
Yeah, totally, because it's harder to find reference for it.
Exactly. I mean, he's got the face shape, but again, he didn't have pupils in this, and like less muscle structure and whatever.
Yeah, totally. Like
stuff.
it's just challenging to do, isn't it?
So yeah, I thought the art was good. I thought the fact that overall I thought it was good. The fact that I didn't notice it a lot was just, I thought, supported the story because I was so into the story. So
totally, and it was it was really readable.
Yes,
the whole
scanned really well.
Yeah, the whole thing was super legible, which often when we get into the art, and if I have something to say, it's generally about legibility, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's generally like, oh, there was jank here, you know, there was poorly illustrated faces, there was posing that wasn't great, body proportions are off, that kind of stuff. This was just very legible.
Yeah.
I like the way that Cap was drawn in general. Yes. I think we have a kind of more squat, muscular Cap here than what I'm used to.
Well, this is what I was saying about the proportions. Like, none of the characters were overly muscular.
Yeah.
But then, like, Wolverine compared to the other two looked muscular in a way that made more sense.
He was more compact, wasn't he?
Yes, but he was more muscular than Deadpool because obviously he does more. He is a more muscular character than Deadpool. So yeah, little things like that I thought were good. So onto the story.
Yeah.
I was going to say, do you want to give us the origins as you know them of Wolverine and Captain America?
Their origin stories?
Yeah, like just generally who they are as characters and what their deal is.
Yeah, totally. So Steve Rogers was a weedy soldier in World War II.
He was weedy before becoming a soldier, I'll say.
Yeah, was it World War I or World War II?
World War II, yeah.
World War
he was
II.
fighting Nazis.
And then...
Famous picture of him punching Hitler, like Superman.
Captain America punching Hitler.
Yep.
So they turned him into a super soldier using a super serum.
Yep.
And then
a weird big tank that made like light noises and stuff.
Look, you got to let me do it. You can't keep interjecting every 2 seconds.
This is the fun.
No, this isn't the fun. The fun is Jamie's unabridged, wholly inaccurate.
Okay, shall I just make notes and then you come back with my notes once
Yeah,
you're done?
that's well. I mean that's kind of your jam.
Yes, kind of my thing. Kind of my thing, actually.
Actually, kind of my thing. So they turn him into a super soldier. He gets frozen for 70 years for a reason that I don't understand. That I'm not going to keep talking, so you can't interject with it.
I'm letting you go. I'm letting you go.
And then he gets unfrozen in modern day New York, and he just gets to cut about with the Avengers.
Yeah,
Wolverine is a little Canadian bloke who is a mutant, gets experimented on, and they get rid of his bone claws. Terrible mistake. Best character design, Bone Claw Wolverine. We've talked about this in the past. They replace it with adamantium, and he's just a hardcore little X-Man dude.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
That wasn't very good. I think I have a much better handle on Cap than I do Wolverine.
That's fair. I mean, with Cap, you say about the frozen in the ice, his thing was in World War II, at one point, normally the case is he's getting rid of some kind of bomb on a plane or a ship or something, and he crashes it into like the North Pole just to get it away from like civilization, and and that stops the bomb, and he gets lost in the ice from that. Like that's, I don't know if that was changed because of the Marvel MCU and the Ultimates, which they kind of took that from, or whether it's different beforehand. In publication terms, what actually happened was he was kicking about post-World War II, like in Marvel Comics in like the 50s and 60s, and then he wasn't used for ages. And then later they were making the Avengers with a bunch of characters who they didn't know what to do with.
They were like, well, we've got Captain America, but it'd be really old, so what if he was frozen?
Yeah.
And that's so good.
And then, to explain the appearances he made post-World War II, they said, oh, that was someone else who took up the mantle as Captain America without telling anyone. And then they made that guy, I think they made him into a character Nomad, as in like no affiliated country kind of character. Can't remember that guy's name, but yeah, they had to retcon it basically. It was like, oh, did we say that was Captain America? Nah.
There was some shenanigans.
Yeah. Classic shenanigans. And Wolverine, he Weapon X, like lost all his memories, like had to discover
that
all
was a thing, wasn't it?
So for a while, no one knew like what his origin story was, and it was like cool and mysterious. And then when they revealed it, everyone was like, oh,
was it just a bit flat?
Well, not even like it's one of those things where nothing would have been good enough. Like the mystery was always going to be better than being shown it.
Yeah, totally.
Which is why people have an issue with like Joker having an origin.
Yeah.
Obviously, you know who gave him the kind of definitive origin.
And I was about to say, A Killing Joke is so good that it justifies the Joker having an origin.
Exactly. And it's one that generally works, doesn't it? Like,
yeah, there was a vat of acid, there was stuff happening, like
Red Hood and all that bollocks.
We didn't say the name though. Can a klaxon go off before I say it?
I'll have to download a klaxon noise, but yeah, sure. I could just do wah, 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 wah.
It's the Alan Moore moment, like we do every time.
Yeah. and you make that noise every time.
Oh, no.
Every episode going forward.
No, it's never happened before. Don't make me do it.
And I won't put it in the time codes, so it's a surprise every time.
But yeah. So the story. There's a couple of tiny little plot points that I just want to go over before we get into the story.
Okay.
There's a moment where some shit's happening. Wolverine and Captain America are here, guys, in case you hadn't guessed.
Which is why we're doing it for Deadpool 3, Wolverine, and also Captain America's just a cool guy. So any time he's here is great.
I like Cap more and more.
Great. He's always well written.
Yeah.
Apart from that one time where he was Hydra. But other than that, he's always been great.
Yeah, Steve Rogers is always just like above the line. He's always really cool. There's a point where Wolverine says, I'm an X-Man and an Avenger.
Yeah, he was in the Avengers for a bit.
What?
A lot of the Avengers are like a revolving door. Like for the decades they've been around, loads of people have been Avengers.
Wolverine was an Avenger in like the,
at one point,
in the
I don't know
2010s.
when, but yeah, at some point he was. Literally only because he was the most popular X-Man character. So they eventually someone was like, oh, the Avengers could do with a revamping. Let's take that guy who's really popular from that series and put him in the Avengers. Like, that's all it is.
What was the lineup at the time?
No idea. They've had if you go on the Wikipedia and you look up the Avengers and look up all previous members, it's longer than the actual Marvel universe. Like, there's
really?
Yeah, it's just because it's one of those things. At one point, when I first got into reading comics properly, trying to read a lot of comics that were coming out as they were released, which was around 2016-ish kind of time, they had 2 Avengers teams of like different like lineups, and because even then there was like 20 Avengers members,
right?
And that was just for the year that I was reading. Like, so quantify that by like the decades they've been alive,
Because I would really like to see MCU Tony Stark hanging out with what's his face?
Deadpool or Wolverine?
Australian Wolverine.
Hugh Jackman.
Huge Jackman. Yeah.
I'm the first one to make that joke.
Hugh Jackman and RBJ as Tony Stark and Wolverine together would have been fun.
So apparently, all the news right now with Deadpool 3, and hopefully we're going to see it next week. We haven't actually confirmed that, but...
We're going to have to, aren't we? That's kind of this whole month has been building up to that.
Yeah, we'll see it. We'll talk about it on the podcast, and maybe a video if we can be asked. But yeah, so Hugh Jackman has said that he made Logan like a few years ago, and that was meant to be his like goodbye to the character, and it was a great ending to his character. Then he came back for this because he did always say he always wanted to do something MCU related, because the X-Men haven't been MCU related until very recently, till like this year, and he wanted to work with Ryan Reynolds as
right.
Deadpool. So that was like, oh, I get to do this, I'll come back. Now he's back doing it again. He's like, I could do some more stuff actually, but then everyone's like, we kind of need a new Wolverine for the next slate of X-Men films and everything. So I think the rumored middle ground is he's not going to be the Wolverine going forward, but they're going to do a big multi-dimensional, what's called Secret Wars. Like, it's going to be the next big Avengers thing. And he'll probably turn up in that. So even if they get a new Wolverine, he'll be the other dimension Wolverine or something. We'll probably actually find out at the end of Deadpool 3.
He'll probably end up being like Old Man Logan.
Potentially, yeah, exactly. Like a back in time.
Because
like,
we've had that a bunch of times, haven't we? Like,
I mean, at least once, notably, yeah.
Because I suppose he probably would have been in his 30s, 40s when he started.
Yeah, I reckon so.
And he's fully in his 50s now, isn't he?
Yeah, and he would make a much better Old Man Logan from back in time if they were having him properly. I think it's just going to be like a Secret Wars thing. They're probably going to have Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield Spider-Man there as well because they can. Yeah, exactly, and people love seeing them. So yeah, they'll probably do something like that.
Tobey Maguire remains my favorite Spider-Man.
It's a toss-up between him and Tom Holland because like Tobey Maguire I have the nostalgia for, obviously. Like Spider-Man 2, seeing that when that first came out,
really good.
It's one of the best superhero films ever. But then Tom Holland is like closer to, he does a great job and he's closer to the comic
He
version.
totally knocked it out of the park. He really did. Like his portrayal was so nailed on, wasn't it?
But then a third side to the coin, the quippiest Spider-Man, I think, was Andrew Garfield. And that's a big part of Spider-Man.
I think Andrew Garfield brought an expressiveness to the role when he was in the suit.
Yes. There's a great one where it was he's stopping a mugging and the guy pulls out a knife and he's like, oh, a knife, my weakness. Like, ugh. And yeah, so that kind of
and he's just like shooting webs and sticking him to the wall, isn't he?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
It's really good fun.
So yeah, this story.
It's been one of those episodes where we've just not talked about the comic yet.
I really like the story.
I do. It's, again, much America.
Yeah. But most of the stuff he does is in America, despite being Canadian.
You're getting two Jamie explains a thing in this episode.
Yeah.
So, oh my God.
Have you blanked on it already? Or did you have something prepared?
No. So Deadpool has a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent living in his brain.
Yes, so that happens in the first arc.
I assumed,
story. Yeah, Agent Preston.
Yeah, and so essentially Deadpool discovers that the entire time he's been Deadpool, every once in a while somebody has been capturing, drugging him, and removing his organs.
Yeah.
He goes to track them down. No, he gets captured by them. He's in North Korea.
Yes.
He breaks out and he discovers that because he'd been to see Cap and Wolverine to talk about, somebody experimenting on super soldiers, they'd gotten a bit nervy, captured both of them, and Wolverine, Deadpool, and Captain America end up breaking a bunch of North Korean mutant super soldiers that have been used making Wade's organs and X-Men DNA.
Yep, exactly.
They end up breaking them out of a concentration camp and ultimately murdering the guy who's been doing this.
Yeah, that's basically the story, I'd say. You've nailed it.
I wouldn't say it's basically the story. I'd say it's exactly the story.
It's the story. I tell you what, I made loads of notes, and this was going to be my compliment to the story. I made so many notes about little things I liked. I thought there was a lot of details that I really was impressed with, the level of detail they did in just some of the dialogue and stuff.
Yeah.
Again, I've made the notes. We'll go through them as we go rather than me read them, or I'll do them at little bits at the end. But the main point is I made so many notes because there were so many little bits.
Yeah.
The general story is very Marvel story, here you go.
Well, I think it's interesting because a lot of the superhero stuff we do is this grand sort of existential stuff.
Yes.
There are aliens, there are monsters, there are demons, there are gods.
Normally the world is in danger.
Whereas here it's Kim Jong-un.
Yep.
And there is a literal fucking statue of Kim Jong-un in a panel.
I was surprised when they actually mentioned North Korea, by name. I thought it was going to be because they'll do this a lot sometimes in comics where they'll just go, oh, we're in a Eastern European country or something.
Yeah.
Or we're in an Asian country of nondescript, but one of the ones that's politically fraught and we don't talk about kind of thing. As soon as they went, oh, we're in North Korea, I went, oh shit, we're actually saying it.
They went hard.
Yeah.
And this is at a time where I would have been at university. This would have been my last year at university. I'm so confident that me and my friends at university were having conversations about North Korean missile testing at this point.
Yeah. Probably why it was in the zeitgeist.
That was all going on. And Marvel are just do you know what would be really funny?
Put in a Deadpool comic.
Yeah, totally. And it's very zeitgeisty, but it also feels a little bit tone deaf.
Here's the thing, though. It's if you are treating it in a way of what would the Marvel universe be like if it was like our universe, but with the characteristics of superpowered people and magic and whatever.
Yeah.
It makes total sense that North Korea would build their own super soldiers as alongside making nuclear weapons.
Absolutely. It does. But I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it. It made for a really interesting backdrop for the story, I think.
The other thing they'll do a lot of the times is they'll create a fictional country.
Yeah.
Couple of notable ones. Latveria is where Doctor Doom is king of the country or whatever.
And that's clearly meant to be an Eastern European country,
exactly.
Isn't it?
Madripoor is meant to be an Asian country that's lawless, but it's run by mobsters, basically. So it's still it's a tourist destination for people for gambling and every other illegal thing you can't do in your home country.
So Great Yarmouth.
Yeah, exactly. Great Yarmouth. Real local reference there.
That was a real parochial reference. If you would like to, just Google Great Yarmouth if you're not from in the east of England.
To give you an idea of Great Yarmouth, I was out of Norfolk for a while and was speaking to someone still in England, and I spoke to someone who was like, oh yeah, I went to Great Yarmouth as a kid. And I was like, oh yeah, how'd it go? I was like, I had my bike nicked. I was like, yep. That's
like
it.
Great Yarmouth.
And if you're from Great Yarmouth and you're listening to this, sorry. Not about what we're saying, just sorry you're from Great Yarmouth.
Also, can I have my bike back?
So yeah, Madripoor is one, then there's a bunch of other. I thought they were going to do that. I thought they were going to just a fake created country.
A lightly fictionalized totalitarian state.
Yes.
Well, they did here is just fully set it in North Korea.
Yeah. And one of the best jokes when Deadpool frees Wolverine and Captain America, and Wolverine goes, oh, we're in North Korea.
Yeah, he sniffs it, doesn't he?
Because as we've established, Wolverine has great sense of smell.
I think my favorite North Korea joke is that Deadpool is reasoning with the voice in his head.
Agent Preston.
Agent Preston tells him that he needs to call the Avengers, and he says, yeah, unfortunately, that's probably a good idea. And he opens the door, realizes where he is, and he says, I'll do that as soon as this country invents telephones. And I thought that was such a fantastic little gag.
And again, a lot of little good gags in this.
Loads of funny little gags. It made me chuckle a lot. And I think there was some high comedy in there as well. There were certain moments, there was a point where they were in the middle of a big battle, and Canadian Wolverine told Korean Colossus to throw Korean
The
Wolverine.
fastball special.
The fastball special.
Very, very deep, not kind of deep cut X-Men stuff.
That's something that Wolverine would do, isn't it?
Yeah.
He'd get Colossus to throw him, and he'd just be a little.
They do it so often they have a name for it. Like
Yeah.
it's a what do you call it? Like a tactic or a play.
It's like a wrestling move.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But they call out like
Yeah.
fastball special, and they know. And then you were saying,
Well, he bungles it. So North Korean Wolverine is really not into the idea, and then he just throws him fully over the gate.
and that's totally, not only is it a good joke, totally makes sense. That is a move you would need to practice as a team to get right.
Absolutely. Like, Colossus is very strong, Wolverine is very dense. Strong man throw dense thing, it go far. Like, that's just how that works.
And it's great. They did that in X-Men 3, the film, when they're in the danger room at the beginning fighting a Sentinel. And literally Wolverine, he's like waiting for the kids to like get it together, and they don't. He's like, you know what, screw this. Like, Colossus. And I don't think they even call it that in the film, because that's when they were still like, we're X-Men, but we're not doing the proper comic book stuff. Like, we're not having the costumes or whatever. So he throws him, and he just literally comes back with a Sentinel head. Like,
yeah, I suppose there was an era in comic book films where they couldn't really tell whether they were serving comic book fans or they were trying to make this a mainstream thing. And I feel as though the MCU found their groove with it, where they were like, we can do both.
Well, now they're just like, just do the comic book stuff. Like, just make it as wacky as possible. Like, Hugh Jackman was talking about the costume, because he was saying in the first one, they literally were just in black leather.
Yeah.
And he said, now seeing the costume, and he was always told at the beginning, it's like, yeah, we can't make it like, we got to ground it a bit more for the general audience if we wanted to do well, blah, blah, blah. And now he did Deadpool 3, and when he first put on the proper comic book costume, and he looked and he was like, why didn't we do this from the beginning? Like, because he kind of got it at the beginning. He was like, yeah, that makes sense. And then he looks and it's like, this is great. Like, this
Wolverine
is cool.
in
like,
the yellow and black suit is very cool.
Exactly. And it's just like, looks fun. And it's like, you don't need to explain it because they've got powers. Like, you're already in that world.
He already has swords for hands. Like, it doesn't need to be a thing, does it?
And you can make the costume look cool while still referencing the original like design. Because the original design had like weird like black marks at the side that looks like claws and stuff. And he had the mask with like the pointed parts that were just unnecessary. So you don't need to do all that stuff, but you can still have like the basic color design and like make an updated version. It's like Captain America, his MCU costumes. The first one he had set in World War II it was really cool. It was like muted colors, and it had like satchels and stuff on it. So like in the war, you would have like all the
you'd have provisions
and stuff. There's a bit where he busts into a room, like a hall or a barn or something, and he pulls out a pistol and he's shooting people because it's the war. Like, he would be doing that. Then in the Avengers, they're like, oh, we've got your old costume, and it's his like in the MCU Captain America, he's like he's like a symbol of the war. Like, he's a character. Like, he does like these shows for the soldiers and stuff. That costume looks lame as hell. Like, it's bright colors and it just looks weird, and he's got like the A on his forehead and stuff, and it's like, ugh. And they uses that in the Avengers film. That's like one of the few parts of the Avengers film I'm not a fan of. Then Winter Soldier, same color design, muted colors again, looks cool as hell. Like,
he looked great in the Winter Soldier.
Exactly, yeah. Also, have you seen the trailer for the new Captain America film with Sam Wilson?
No.
I'll show you that afterwards.
Is this Sam Wilson as Cap?
Yeah, Falcon, yeah. It's very cool.
That'd be cool.
Great little sub-story about like him stepping into these big shoes. Like, there's a line literally, someone goes, you're not Steve Rogers. And he's like, yeah, I'm not. Like,
he's
I'm
not
well
even
aware.
enhanced though, because he had a
wingsuit.
Yeah, was that a Stark design?
No, that was like a military thing beforehand. I mean, Stark designed it years ago or something, but it's never been acknowledged. So as far as we're concerned, no, it's not.
Because he's kind of nothing without the wingsuit.
But that's kind of the point. It's like Captain America, to say he's nothing without the super soldier serum, in a sense of like fighting bad guys, yeah. But the argument is, it's like, it's not the super serum and it's not the wingsuit. It's the man and what he does.
It's the friends we made along the way.
It's the real you. It's the it's the you deep down, or some other fortune cookie bollocks. As said, my notes always start from the start, so I'm just kind of going in that general order.
Well, no, let's just talk about the story.
Yeah, but if I'm looking through, like, no, because my first point is about where the story starts, which I think is a noble thing.
Right. Okay.
I like that the main core of the story starting is someone who, this makes total sense, someone who is rich or powerful or both and has the capabilities, who has a dying loved one, will naturally go after the guy with the healing factor. to try and use it to save their loved one. Like, that makes sense.
I thought that whole thing was super fucking lame. When he like falls on top of her tank and he's like, "Oh my dear, I'll save you." It was so melodramatic and it was such a lame moment in amongst such a well-written comic. He's way too into his sister for me. Do you know what I mean though?
He loves his sister too much.
A little bit, yeah.
Fuck that guy. He cares about his family.
My sister's really fucking cool. She doesn't listen to the podcast, so I can say this.
Fair.
My sister's really fucking cool. I'm really fucking fond of my sister. If she was poorly, I wouldn't like fall onto her crying and weeping. I'd take her some grapes and some flowers.
Yeah, but she'd also be frozen in a tank at this point as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'd freeze her in the tank.
I brought you some grapes so I can eat them in front of you.
But do you not see where I'm coming from?
I can, yeah, it's melodramatic, as is fiction.
Wildly melodramatic.
As is fiction at times. Like, and I'm not disputing your point. Like, that is like the weakest part of the comic, absolutely. But if you're saying, and you can argue the artistic thing of like, I don't think they should have gone in that direction and whatever. But if you're saying like, people wouldn't do that, it's like there are people in the world who probably would have done it as melodramatically as that. Like,
yeah,
that's to say it's unrealistic is like, I mean, how many times have you seen people in reality shows who like kick off and start crying or whatever and act in ways where you go, I'd never act like that way. It's like, yeah, but people are weird and messed up. Like, we're going into a much bigger conversation. But all I'm saying is, yeah, I agree with you that the weird tone for the comic that early on, especially to do that stuff at the beginning. Like, I think they could have built up to that and then revealed him to be that fucked up a guy later on, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because to be honest with you, that popped up in issue 15, issue 1 of the run.
From
what we read it from
part one of the story.
Exactly. Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. And I just sort of looked at it and I was like, what's this bollocks Ryan's got me reading?
Yes.
You know, because it was so melodramatic and so hammy and so overwritten.
But then the fact that it's only that character, does that maybe speak? And I'm just playing devil's advocate here.
No, maybe, I agree with you. It's only that character.
So maybe that just speaks to like, he is a fucked up character.
I just think that they could have presented it in a way that made it feel so much more naturalistic. Like, I don't need him to fall onto her frozen body weeping, calling her his love. For me to be like, it's plausible that guy would do some fucked up shit to Deadpool in service of saving a loved one.
Yeah.
Like, that motivation makes enough sense on its own that I don't need the King Lear act at the start. It
does kind of support it, somewhat foreshadows and supports the ending of the sister then
Deadpool
being like,
and his daughter.
Well, more, I would say this character and his sister coming back to life essentially and being unfrozen and being like, I don't want to live with what you've done to give me life. I don't want to.
Also,
now.
She's not even sure she's his sister.
Yeah, that is a point as well.
He found her in an orphanage.
That was a really subtle, like, I read that and I went, wait, what? Like, that's such a small little, like, point. I was like, hang on.
Totally.
And I appreciate that. Like, I like those details being given out in a way where you go, it makes you read closer.
And I suppose that kind of explains his actions because it's like, this guy is just clearly...
He's mental.
Fucking insane. Yeah,
yes.
Absolutely. In terms of the way the story progresses, I think Deadpool's actions are consistently really nailed on for what I would expect from the character.
Yeah.
And I love the way he behaves in issue 1 and 2. He's just sort of, you know, I mean, we see this a lot, don't we, where there's a comic book character who's discovering a wider conspiracy. Like Human Target, I think, is a really good example of that. And their behaviors as we see this start to play out is probably the most interesting thing, right?
Yeah.
And it's totally the case for me there in those early issues. Like Deadpool's behaviors and what I'm seeing from him are probably the most interesting thing.
He's uncovering the plot, so as the reader, you're interested because you get a little more and a little more of the what's going on and stuff.
And it's a really nice naturalistic way to meter that plot out.
Yeah.
And again, you know, as the story progresses, I just swore for no reason.
Were you about to say the fucking North Koreans?
I was literally about to say the fucking North Korean thing. As much as I think it was a bit hammy and I'm like unsure about it as a creative decision, I'm really into it as a setting.
Yeah.
Like I was hooked.
And it makes sense as well because the whole basis of this being this thing that he's doing is like the unofficial follow-up to Department K and Weapon X.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that like even Captain America says like the American government have disavowed Weapon X and or everything that everything that it does. So if you want to do that kind of stuff, you have to go abroad.
Yeah.
And then it becomes like, where can you go? Again, if you look at like real world political things, that it's like, where can you go where that wouldn't be an issue? Because every other country will be allied with America or whatever.
Which world
North
leader
Korea.
would be mad enough to allow that to happen?
Exactly.
Oh, there's one.
Literally the country that is in real life hoarding and creating and hoarding weapons.
Yeah, totally.
And these are the super soldiers. I did think that was interesting at one point where the North Korean general is like, come on, hurry up, you're being late, whatever. And all anonymous because you don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
But this guy, Butler, is like, oh, I've delivered you all this stuff. And then he's like, yeah, but now you're being late or whatever. And at that point, you're like, all right, this is just, normal disagreement, but, adding tension to the whatever.
Yeah.
And then later it's like, oh, it turns out what he's done so far is given North Korea their own X-Men. It's like, fuck, lighten up, General. Like, Jesus Christ. Like,
he's done
get a
sterling
bit
work
greedy.
here.
Like, he's already given you a super soldier team.
And there was some really subtle details that I found really interesting and charming. So there was a point whereby Wolverine is holding on to Korean Wolverine.
Great emotional moment.
Really great emotional moment. And one of the other heroes, the one who speaks fluent English, says, his body regenerates, but his brain doesn't. So to be honest with you, if you let him die, you're probably doing him a service.
Well, not even let him die. He says, like, we should kill him.
Yeah.
Like, because he's not going to recover.
And that really hammered home to me, like, the suffering that these people were going through. And it was such a minute detail that I think you could have passed by it because it was happening in amongst all this action, wasn't it? So it was a very discreet detail, but it really showed like the levels of suffering they were trying to get across for these characters. And, they had like their families were being held in another concentration camp and they were there at the risk of the death of their families, right?
And a really bold choice. Normally in any other comic, they liberate this other camp where the families of the X-Men, the North Korean X-Men are being held captive. And some get reunited, but then others go, not all of them made it. And any other comic, they would have just gone, right, all the family's been released and everyone's reunited now and it's all fine now.
We see a huge pit of dead people.
Yeah, and we see a pit of corpses and we see some of the Korean X-Men who are like, oh, my family are dead and they're crying and stuff. And like, I thought that was a bold choice to add a little realism to this, again, like elevated, crazy Marvel world,
Totally.
So I really appreciate those details. That moment with Wolverine and Korean Wolverine, who did have a name. I can't remember it now, unfortunately. But the moment where the North Korean Nightcrawler is like, I can do it if you want. Like, and Wolverine's like, no, I'll do it. And you just hear that the snick, there's the snicked or snit is like the sound effect for the claws coming out. And it just happens off panel. Yeah. And you just see Wolverine like looking down, somber, and like holding him. And like to put that in a Deadpool comic, like in amongst like the jokes and stuff, I thought it was put in a way it didn't feel out of place. It was built up to like, yeah, I thought that was really great.
It was a really powerful moment.
Yeah. And in terms of details, there was one point where we were following Nightcrawler, North Korean Nightcrawler, and he's talking English. And at this point I'm going, okay, he knows English. I think this is just don't worry about it kind of thing. And then literally the next panel, they go, hey, your English is really good. Why is that? And he's like, well, we were designed to one day invade America.
Well, he said we were going to invade China and then America.
Yeah.
Oh, no, it was the South and then America.
Yeah. So they want them knowing the language of the place they're going to invade. So again, I read that and I went, great. I love that they took the time to add that detail to make things more realistic and clarify stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And something that they did really well here that comic books don't always do well is that you notice he was speaking quite stunted, not heavily accented English. He was speaking very clean, precise English in the way that somebody who has learned a second language would.
Yes.
Like he's speaking quite a formal, and I have gotten shitty at comic books recently that don't get dialect right.
Yep.
And I read that and it was really believably the dialect of somebody who had learned a second language and was still speaking in its most formal form. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
And it wasn't overly formal, but it was like he was speaking Duolingo English.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, added to the realism, like, again, just little attention detail I really enjoyed. The relationship between Deadpool and Agent Preston, I thought was really good here. this woman who was stuck in Deadpool's head because it was either that or die. Like,
yeah, and I think sort of replaced some of what we normally get with Deadpool. So often with Deadpool, we get this very frenetic sort of stream of consciousness almost, don't we? And we definitely saw that last week. Whereas because he wasn't just talking with himself, he was talking with somebody else who was in his head. It was like there was this more ground sheet, like he let her take over at points, and I thought that was really cool.
Well, that was a particularly good because he didn't just let her take over; he had given up.
Yeah.
So she was like, "I'm going to take over." Then he's like, "Do whatever you want. Like, I'm done. I'm not fighting anymore." And that was a really kind of powerful moment of like her kind of picking up the slack and getting him to a point where he's like gets into a fight and he's like, you're not as good as this, I'm going to take over now, kind of thing. So, and it's good as well because this Preston character is like relying on Deadpool to get her one day a new body and back to her family. Totally. And he's just given up at one point and she's like, what the fuck else am I meant to do? Like, and I thought that was just an extra little thing.
And again, there's throughout all the Deadpool comics I've seen, there's consistently been these fun, interesting uses of his yellow speech bubble.
Yes.
And here, Preston had a purple speech bubble and his was yellow. And so we were seeing two different voices come out of the same character in a way that was so elegant, so simple, and most importantly, really readable.
Yes.
It's scanned perfectly. I always like the idea of having two distinct voices come out of one comic book character. Unless you find an elegant way to portray that on the page, it's a clusterfuck, right? But they did a good job of it here. Like in terms of the visual storytelling and the way that they portrayed that, it was well done, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I liked how respectful Deadpool was to Captain America.
Well, we've talked about this, haven't we? That Cap and Deadpool quite like each other.
I think it's a bit more complex than that. It's that Deadpool really respects Captain America because Captain America is one of the few people who treats Deadpool like a normal person.
Yeah.
And you notice, like, when he's around Wolverine and he talks to Agent Preston, and Wolverine's just like, hearing voices still, are ya? Like, he's just written off Deadpool as, like, you're mental. Like, and I don't want to treat you like a normal person. Captain America is always very, like, he's like, finds Captain America mid-gunfight, like, mid-fight, and he's just like, hey, Cap, you got a minute? Like, that. And even, like, that, and no one else would do it like that.
Yeah.
But for Deadpool, like, he wouldn't even ask anyone else. Like, he didn't ask Wolverine, he just broke into his hotel room.
He found him there with Storm.
Yeah, that was wild. I was like, wait, what?
That was super, because so for the listener who may not have read this, we don't see Storm. She's under the covers, and as Deadpool leaves, he's like, oh, hey, Storm, and she's like, hey, Wade. And it's like there's a little square bubble that says, yeah, these two are doing it weird, huh?
Yeah, I have read quite a bit of X-Men, and even I was like, wait, what? Like, I didn't know this was a thing. Obviously, I've missed it.
Any port of Storm?
Yep.
Wait.
Good pun. You get the, I'll put in a ba-dum-bum or a ding. One of the two. I think I've already got the ding. But yeah, when he's also love that bit when he's sneaking into the hotel room, he steals a wait staff uniform and puts it over his costume. Yeah. So he's still wearing the Deadpool mask while in disguise.
Yeah.
But yeah, when he's then speaking to Captain America, he's like genuinely asking for his advice and help. Yeah. And when Captain America doesn't palm him off, but he's like, here's what I think you should do instead of following this. Like, maybe you just need someone to talk to, kind of thing. So he's not like Wolverine, who's just like, I ain't helping you.
There's a really funny moment actually there where it seems as though Cap is recommending therapy, and it turns out that the person that Cap has been talking to is his barber,
which is a very World War II thing.
Well, it's just a tiny little bit of toxic masculinity seeping in, and I found it really charming.
Yeah, and that's how he is. Like, he's a very open-minded person, but he's stubborn in his own way.
He's stoic
for himself.
There's a high level of stoicism there.
Exactly. Yeah. The bit towards the end, I mean, I don't think I've got any other like big story bits. I've got loads of little details I'm going to do like a big little bits over.
Oh no, we can't have the whole podcast just be Ryan's little bits where you're just running through notes.
Yeah, but I go, this part was good, and you go, yeah, that was good.
The artistry is weaving it into the discussion.
No, that sounds a little too much like chaotic jazz, and you know how I feel about that.
No, that's how conversations work, Ryan.
I'm sorry, what? Conversations? How does that work?
No.
The big story part I was going to get to was the semi-reveal, and I know how this goes because I remember this later on in the comic, but there's a reveal that Deadpool may or may not have a daughter.
Yes. Does he, by the way?
He does, yes.
Right. Is she alive?
Yes, she is alive.
Sick.
Yeah, great character. Like, why I love this run so much.
Is she super?
Yes, but it's not shown at this point.
Right.
She's actually a mutant. And
that kind of makes sense, doesn't it? His DNA is pretty mutant at this point.
Yeah, there's a kind of theory that maybe like Deadpool's mutation, like he gets the healing factor from Wolverine, like that's put in him from Weapon X or Department K or whatever. But there's a theory that his mutation, and it's kind of a dark thing, but his mutation might be his aggressive cancer. If that makes sense. And it's in the way that like the theory, like X-Men, when you look at them, there's like most people have great powers from their X gene mutation. Some of them like look weird, like your Nightcrawler or Beast or Mystique or whatever, who are all blue for some reason as well. But like, you know, other characters as well who just look like crazy monsters, but they still have powers and stuff and they're still superpowered. So the idea is behind that theory is like, maybe there are other mutations, but they're not all powers. They are positive. They're negative mutations. And one would be an extremely aggressive cancer, because he literally goes from like totally fine one day to you've got cancer everywhere, like all over your body kind of thing. So yeah, that's a theory that may or may not be true or whatever. But yeah, his daughter's a mutant, and it's revealed later like what she kind of is or what her power is. But yeah, towards the end, this whole emotional arc changes from him being like, people are after me and stealing my organs, and I don't like that, to, oh, I might have a daughter. Like, and that becomes a huge emotional weight. And then it's kind of revealed that she might be dead or might not have ever existed. Yeah. And I liked that they ended this story on that point. Because again, without me spoiling what happens later in the series. And again, if you haven't read this series and you want to, I barely given anything away. It's still worth reading. There's so much good stuff in this series post where we read.
Yeah, I mean, wherever it's really telling, because as has been established, I don't take notes. I rely on my memory.
Yes.
And every point of the story that we've ended up talking about today, there has been a little detail that has instantly come to mind for me. And that doesn't happen with every comic that we read. Sometimes, you know, when I mention 3 or 4 little details that I find interesting in something, they will be the things that I found interesting in it. Whereas here, there was lots of little details. And I agree with you, that ambiguous ending was the right ending for this arc. Yep. Because it's mid-art. It's mid, you know, we're 15 issues into what ended up being like a 60-issue run or something, aren't we?
Yeah.
And that ambiguity in the ending is exactly where they needed to leave Deadpool for this. Yeah. Because he's just realized that so much of what everyone thought was insanity was actually falsified memories, memory issues caused by the experimentation that was still being done on him. And so a Deadpool that's sort of baffled at the end of it and just sort of angry and upset, not really knowing what's happened, that's exactly where he should be at this point in the run.
Yep. And the retcon of like some of his backstory, because there's a point where he, like, this guy's saying like about his history, and Deadpool goes, oh, so T-Ray lied. And T-Ray was from the 97 run, who it's after where we would have, after what we read, he goes on to kind of reveal to Deadpool that he's someone from his past. Yeah. And that's why he hates him so much. And he says all this stuff about Deadpool's origin and stuff. Right. So 20 years later, Deadpool goes, oh, T-Ray was lying then, was he? And the butler guy being like, I don't know who that is, but probably. Like, yeah. But there's a great joke as well where Deadpool's like, Butler says specifically, you were captured and put into the simulation while we took your organs at times. So I don't know what they programmed you to have those simulations. So I don't know what's real and what's not of your memories. But he's like, Deadpool's like, but I remember growing up in Ohio at one point. And he's like, well, I'm pretty sure you are Canadian. So I think that's why. And he's like, thank God, and shoots him. And then Butler's like, I'm from Ohio though. And he's like, yeah, I can tell, like, massive diss of people from Ohio, apparently.
Little did they know in 2013 when they wrote this that by 24, children would just find Ohio funny.
Yes. Good meme. We know jokes.
And I heard it was a Gen Alpha thing. Yeah. Ohio's funny for some reason. I don't understand why. Skibbity
toilet. Oh, I know.
I know what Skibbity toilet is, but apparently Skibbity's just a thing. I also discovered mewing the other day, which is just like children stroking their cheeks in a weird way that's meant to be like seductive when you put the Riz on somebody. I don't understand any of it, Ryan, and it makes me really sad that I'm now that old person.
Do you know what a Giat is?
It's a bunda.
Yes. Do you know why it's called a Giat?
No.
Because it's maybe short for like, Giat, damn.
Do you know what?
I'm terminally online.
Do you know what? I remember when I was a teenager and people.
We used to have real slang.
No, this is it. I remember when I was a teenager and adults rolled their eyes at the shit that I would say. And I remember thinking they were desperately uncool. And so I don't understand what the kids are on about. But do you know what? They're kids.
Yeah. Good for them.
Fucking let them be.
Have your own stuff.
Because hopefully at some point I will be old and they will be the. Well, hopefully I will be old at some point, Ryan.
I'm saying we're already old, is what I'm saying.
No, but at some point, providing life goes well for me, I'll be old enough that policy decisions have to be made to keep me safe, and somebody has to look after me, and it'll be those kids doing it. And if they want to mew and put the Riz on each other and look at gyats, that's fucking their business, not mine.
Yeah. You do you guys, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was going to try and weave one of my notes into the conversation, but we've tanged it away.
No.
Speaking on the whole Deadpool possibly having a daughter thing, at one point Wolverine or Captain America asks about it. He's like, yeah, I might have a daughter. It's like, it's normally a thing people, I know it's not normally a thing you forget unless you're an NBA player.
Yeah.
I thought, great.
Having a child.
Great line.
Or apparently Drake.
Oh, God. Yeah. I mean, that's a whole nother podcast about the whole Drake, Kendrick Lamar thing.
Oh, I reckon you could wring a whole podcast out of it if you wanted to.
I mean, I think people have, and they would have done a job way better than we ever could. So go listen to those people.
You've been following it, haven't you?
I've kept abreast, yes.
What did you do with the rest of the body?
Ate it.
But
yeah, I find it fascinating. Like, I like the underdog story of Kendrick Lamar, who's like a multi-award winning rapper or whatever.
Yeah, totally.
The underdog story of him and Drake being like an asshole and stuff. And yeah, I thought it was pretty interesting. But again, there's YouTubers who have done a far better job of it than we ever could. Yeah, I think we've covered, as I said, the main kind of story points and how great they were. And again, the very kind of somber ending at the end.
Yeah.
I liked a little tiny bit of like a positive ending was Wolverine telling Deadpool they should go for a beer sometime.
Yes.
And that was like such a realistic, small like sign of like, I respect you more than I did before. Like,
yeah,
kind of thing.
Totally. Well, I mean, I think, they have that moment in Japan, don't they? Where it's like the three of them are just sort of saying goodbye. And Cap and Wolverine are getting in his cab, and Wade is Wade at that point, not Deadpool as well. He's just there in his hat with his fucking Hawaiian shirt for some reason. And yeah, no, it was quite poignant, wasn't it?
Yeah. Oh, another thing I almost forgot to. I thought this was a great story point. Was the reveal of the mid-story twist. Deadpool thinks him and Wolverine are fighting off all the soldiers and winning.
Yeah.
And then it turns out that he's been captured and is in a simulation.
Yeah.
I thought that was a great reveal. I did not see it coming. I was given no clues as to why that could be a thing. And then as soon as it happened, I was like, oh, that's why Wolverine's suddenly nice to him.
There was one point in the story that I really wanted to mention, actually. And it's after they realize they're in a simulation. Wade has actually broken them out. And Cap says, oh, I'm going to go above ground. You guys deal with it here. And Wade makes a little jab. And Wolverine sort of gets him and says, no, while you're doing your thing, he's fighting off the entire North Korean army. And also, while he's up there, he doesn't have to report back on whatever we do down here.
Yeah.
And it's like Wolverine's way of saying, you realize that Captain America, the most noble man in America, is giving you a mulligan so you can go and murder this guy and he doesn't have to tell Tony Stark.
Yeah.
Basically.
And standing up to the entire North Korean army, literally just standing there. And it was such a clever thing because it looks cool, like him just standing to this army, kind of like Endgame. But it explains why they're not moving in because he's just standing there and they're like, well, should we just go over and shoot him? And they're like, he might be with the rest of the Avengers. Like, we don't know if they're here or not.
They don't know if they exist or not. That's the thing. They're like, do they have the big green guy or the guy in the armor? And they're like, they don't exist. And like, I don't know.
No, because they're literally like, oh, that's just American propaganda.
Yeah.
And as the reader, you're like, no, they exist.
No, the Hulk is real and he will fuck your shit up.
You can see Captain America. Like, just assume the rest exist as well. But
the thing is, Captain America is just a guy in a leather suit with a shield.
Yeah.
Like, imagine if the Hulk and fucking Iron Man turned up.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, shit.
But it's great as well. The stories about Captain America even penetrate this isolated country where it's all just written off as American propaganda. Even then, they're like, they've heard the stories and what he can do. And they're like, maybe let's not. Like, We don't know. Like, maybe he's just a guy, but I don't want to risk that.
I don't want to risk that shit.
And it's an entire army. Like,
and at the very end, when they're like, right, we're going to have to fight off the entire North Korean army, and Deadpool's like, nope. And they all walk through and they just part for them.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
And when they wake up from that simulation, a great plot point I like is Deadpool anticipates this happening to him.
Yeah.
So he literally cuts himself open in the leg and puts in, I don't even know what it necessarily was, but it was something that just woke him up mid-simulation.
It doesn't need explaining.
No.
He stuck a thing in him and it did a job.
Yeah.
Like, again, I would have been annoyed if they'd have spent a bit of time going, oh, we've got some nanotech here that's going to go through my blood and it's going to wait. I don't care.
Well,
there's a MacGuffin. It did a job. Tool for a job, right?
He does say he tells you what it is. When Preston's like, what is it? He goes, it's Ant-Man in a condom.
Oh, yeah, he does, yeah, which is really funny.
Which is another detail weaving into the story.
Well done.
But in that...
Look at you go.
I really liked the setting where that fight takes place. And they set it up in a really clever way. Deadpool's waiting by a radio to hear, like, police reports or police chatter on a radio, and eventually he hears that a murder's taken place. He goes, right, we've got somewhere to sleep tonight.
Yeah.
He's literally waiting for a murder scene so he can stay the night there.
Man, yeah, I'd forgotten about that. That's such a cool detail of this version of Deadpool, is that he's just like in such a degraded state that he just sleeps in the homes of people who have been murdered.
And Preston's like, I cannot sleep here. And he's like,
Yeah.
I just got into sleep. Like, you woke me up.
Well, he just says, well, I'll move to the sofa. Because, like, the guy had, like, been shot in his bed. So the bed was just covered in blood.
Yeah. Deadpool's like, I just got to sleep. Like, I loved that fight scene. Like, even though it was a simulation, was so great. Like, it had Wolverine like, I'll go high, you go low. And Wolverine cuts the rope of the guys as they're scaling the outside of a 2-story. No, I think, or maybe it's a block of flats or something. But, I think it was less than a normal 2-story house.
I mean, he drops a bunch of dudes to their death.
Yes. But then it had one of my favorite tropes in action films, which you don't see these days anymore, but it was a big thing in like the 90s. And I didn't even realize this was a trope until I read it here. It's the setting the microwave as a timed bomb. Used to see that all the time in the 90s, and I haven't seen it since. And then Deadpool just packs it with like kitchenware and knives and stuff and sets it for a time, and he's like, this is going to blow up in a minute. Like, so lovely little trope that I just had forgotten had even existed. Again, a little note that I would not be able to put anywhere else. This is essentially my little bit, so maybe put the timer here. Little bits. And again, this one wouldn't fit anywhere else, but I thought it was still such a cool scene. Deadpool says, oh yeah, normally you can make a gun silencer out of like a tin can or whatever. It's like,
or a bicep,
or a human bicep.
He shoots through his own bicep.
And I wondered in that moment, I was like, is that true? I was like, because it makes sense why no one's ever done it before.
Yeah.
But I was like, I wonder if that's a thing.
I mean, because of his unique physiology. Yeah, probably. Like,
I mean, a pillow seems to work in films, doesn't it? Like, where people do like a stealth kill and they put a pillow over the person's head and like hold the gun to it.
Yeah.
So maybe a bicep works as well. Like, who knows?
There's only one way to find out.
That's Mythbusters. If only they were still a thing.
Richard Hammond's Brainiacs.
Very, very local reference.
That's a British deep cut.
British deep cut. A bit of a harrowing moment, which I think was like so quick and almost like underutilized. The way that they ask Nightcrawler how he learnt his powers, or North Korean Nightcrawler, and it flashbacks to multiple North Korean Nightcrawlers being tied to posts and literally being told, we're going to shoot you in the head unless you teleport. And there's 3 of them, and they go literally, first
bang,
one,
bang, bang.
bang, second one, bang, third one, teleport. And they go, right, let's do it again. And just that like 1-page scene, and you go, fucking hell.
Well, this is quite clearly quite of anti-North Korean propaganda, isn't it? Like, there's no other way to look at it.
I'm just saying, if I was putting money on any country to do this in real life, they'd be near the top, is all I'm saying.
To our North Korean listeners, if there are any, I don't endorse that opinion. I'm sure it's a wonderful nation.
Yes, and your leader got something like a hole-in-one in every round of golf he's ever played, or whatever that story is.
That.
Pretty sure it's correct, yeah.
Is that actually a thing?
That was the previous leader, not the current
Kim Jong-il.
His dad, yeah.
Kim Jong-il.
Yeah, they were like, he played this impossible round of golf, and everyone's just like, whatever, fine, okay. Like, we're not going to chat. That's really low on the list of things that we're going to worry about here.
Are they still accepting tourists in North Korea? Because they were at one point, weren't they?
Yeah, but then there's a thing where whenever they want to speak to, like, I don't know if this is a thing now, but not too long ago, whenever they actually wanted to speak to, like, the rest of the world or America, they just pick up one of these tourists and put them in prison. So it's like, yeah, you could go and you'd get the tour of, like, you know, the allocated tour of, like, here's all the nice areas. Yeah. But at any point, they could be like, oh, we want to speak to America, right? You're going to prison. Like,
yeah, totally.
Any point, like, there's.
I wouldn't go.
Absolutely not. Do you remember how someone described the North Korean Wolverine?
No.
Because Wolverine asked, like, oh, do they have one of me? And Deadpool says, I saw a North Korean Danny DeVito on steroids.
Yeah, no, yeah, that was great.
Which, again, just fun bit.
Lots of little jokes. And you know what? Coming back to what you said right at the top, it does kind of stand to reason that there was a comedian on board to write the one-liners because the one-liners were super snappy.
Exactly. And I would say, going forward, if I was like in any kind of position of in charge of Marvel, I'd be like, get another comedian. Like, get Brian Posehn if you can, because he's obviously great at it. Yeah. But if you can't get him for whatever reason, get not just any comedian, but get like a comedian who's into comics. Because
get Seth Rogen,
or like Patton Oswalt. I think would be a good one. He'd be great for that. There's a bunch you could get. And
I think there's a big crossover between like working comedians and comic book fans, isn't there?
Because I think it's really asking a lot of a writer, comic book writer, to be like, here's a funny character, make them funny.
Yeah, exactly.
Comic book writers, by and large, don't need to be funny. If they can, and there's a bunch that are, great. Like, to
get somebody who is good at being funny,
it's much more likely you'll get a run-of-the-mill character, and they'll be like, oh, they were quite funny in this volume, like, because this writer's a bit funny. But it's another thing to be like, here's Deadpool, make with the funny.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
It's like trying to host a podcast and trying to be funny everything you say. It's like, it's really daunting at times. People don't realize the pressure that we're on, or that people generally are on. And one last line that I really enjoyed, Deadpool teleporting next to a soldier and saying, surprise... hang on, wait, I've got it here. I'm Dr. Deadpool, surprise dentist, and knocks his teeth out.
Yeah, with a knuckle duster.
With knuckle dusters that say dead on one fist and pool on the other. Again, where'd he get them from? Probably one of his patches or satchels or whatever.
Who cares? It's great.
It was just fun. So yeah, I think we've covered everything.
Yeah.
And as much as we can. And again, this is 5 issues within a series that lasted 50 issues. We didn't even do the start. I went back and read the first series and the first arc of this series and really enjoyed it. It's a natural starting off point, but it was more important for us, I think, to see his interactions with Wolverine and Captain America.
That's what we're here for.
Yeah, exactly. And, ties in with the Deadpool 3. And if you notice, the comics we've done, I don't know if I've mentioned this before or not, but the comics we've done have tied in with the films.
Yeah, totally.
Deadpool's origin for the 2016 Deadpool film. We did Cable and Deadpool for Deadpool 2, which had Cable in it. And now we've done Deadpool and Wolverine and Captain America because he's cool. And all in preparation for next week when hopefully we might have seen the Deadpool film and maybe cut in a little mini review or something of it for next week's podcast.
Absolutely.
Schedule's pending, obviously.
So, thank you for listening. I lied to you last week, listener. I said that there would be a YouTube video up by last Monday, but it is up now. I did it. I finished it. So go to Myths for Sad Grown-Ups. Myths for Sad Grown-Ups is my YouTube channel. The newest video should be about Jormungand the World Serpent, and you can watch it there.
That sounds like a cool subject, and I would check it out, and I would be remiss if anyone who listens didn't check it out.
Thank you for the advert. Thank you for listening. Oh, yeah, so comment. We got a comment on the YouTube upload of our last episode.
A little repeat commenter.
Yeah, repeat commenter. Was it?
Yeah.
Rad. I love that. And I'm going to read that comment now because we had talked about it in that episode. And so I found that really funny. And this comment was great. And I just wanted to highlight you, sir. The comment was, Deadpool being alcoholic was new to me. Perhaps a spoiler warning next time. I would like to critique your spag there. It should be an alcoholic. But I apologize for the lack of spoiler warning. I'm pretty confident I wasn't right anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Yes. And it was X amount of time before someone was going to complain about it.
Yeah,
but also, I think they were just referencing us joking about spoilers.
I think you were, and it was a good YouTube comment. It made me laugh. It made me very happy. Comment again, please, and it'll get read out.
And that goes for everyone.
Thank you for listening. Goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye.